welcome to the penultimate session of the Healthtech Marketing Summit. And this session is about AI. We're going to just give it a second. I see there's about 8 people already logged in, but I'm expecting that as the other session wraps up, that number will pick up. I think the other session was just wrapping up. So those of you who don't know me, I'm the CEO and founder of Health Launchpad. We're presenters of today's summit. I also want to give a big thank you to our presenting sponsors, Tenon and HIMS. Tenon transforms the way marketing teams plan and execute their campaigns at scale, and HIMS is the global advisor, thought leader, and member-based society committed to reforming the global health ecosystem through the power of information technology. And before we really kick things off, a couple of housekeeping things. The question that comes up all the time is this being recorded? The answer is yes. And the other question that comes up is about the chat. So please do use the chat. Put your questions. If you've got any ideas, put them in the chat. Start off with, go say who you are. Introduce yourself in the chat and where you are. You're online right now. In fact, a bunch of people have been putting their LinkedIn profiles in, so do that too. That's great way to network. This session is about using AI to transform your marketing. And so Casey, my partner in crime here, is going to show you how to use generative AI across sales and marketing to boost productivity. He's also going to show you how you can use it to write better, write more personalized emails, improve the way that you generate content, social posts, things like that. And we'll even touch on how you might integrate it into platforms like Zapier and much more. Now, Casey is like, somebody I've known now for about 5 years. In fact, I think I got to know Casey. I think you were pitching me when I ran my software company. Yes. And that's how we got to know each other. Right. At the time, you were running Epic Presence, right? Your content marketing agency, your inbound agency.
Correct.
And then Casey, over the last few years, and he'll tell his story, has become a real expert in the use of AI. And we actually have engaged. We engaged Casey about a year ago to help us on our ABM journey. In fact, what we did was we basically ripped apart how we do the work that we do, and Casey helped us improve the productivity of it using AI. So we use AI, day to day as part of it, as a key part of how we do a lot of what we do. Just so glad to have Casey here as part of today's summit. So Casey, talk about yourself and tell us a bit about what you're going to cover today.
Absolutely, Adam. It's really a pleasure to be here. I have, like you said, run a content marketing agency for about 10 years. In 2018, I started to get pretty passionate about AI, started to learn a little bit of Python programming. I started to train my own neural nets. I had a really top-notch data scientist on staff for a while. We were doing a lot of experiments, analyzing content, and trying to use AI for that well before ChatGPT was launched. But around, when GPT-2 launched and I saw how well it could write, our agency's primary focus, or really the main thing that we did, was write long-form blog articles. So I had my eye on that and was kind of curious when the day might happen that these tools were going to, change the way that we operated fundamentally. And once ChatGPT rolled out, that became a real, source of initially anxiety for sure for me, but now It's a joy, and I use it every day. And I've really pivoted what I do to helping teams use and integrate AI into all of what they do, not just their content, but decision making, process improvements, analyzing and optimizing campaigns, all sorts of different things. And that's kind of what I want to share with you today. So I don't know, Adam, would it be a good time to dive in and share?
Go for it.
All right.
Lead on.
Let me get this deck fired up here. And how is that looking, Adam?
Looking good.
Awesome. So we're going to go through a few things today. I'm going to start with some big picture things to just help you get your mindset right, as I've experimented with these for 20, 30 hours a week now for well over a year and a half. There's a few things I've learned that I think can help before we dive into a few tactical things. We're going to look at a really fairly basic use case, but one that is very useful first, about how to use it to just communicate and answer emails that might be tricky to answer. Then we're going to dive into some use for social media and how you can really improve that from just the basic prompts that you might be using now. And then we'll get into some of the more advanced stuff and touch on some of the agents, some of the things that are really buzzing in the market now. And then we'll get into kind of a bigger picture of how many areas you can plug AI into in your workflows. So to kick it off, this is a framework that I've been using quite a lot that is helpful. And as we go through the examples, maybe in the back of your mind, start to think about these 3 different steps. So gathering source material, drafting, and then editing, and focusing on each step in isolation, or thinking of them as separate steps. When people jump right into ChatGPT and say, write a blog post about XYZ, and they don't like that blog post, it's because you're asking it to do way too many things all at once. But if you can think of where are you going to be able to supply it with source material, this can come from many, many places. This can be, previous articles that you've written that have performed well. This can be transcripts of calls, can be all sorts of things you find on the internet. But thinking about your source material and gathering that up and organizing it, I think is probably the number one most important thing that you can do when you're using AI. Because if you have good source material, maybe it's about your brand, it's about your customers, it's about your processes, whatever it might be, when these AI models continue to get better and better and better, you can just plug that in and be more and more effective. So that's one thing. If you take one thing away from this today, is think about where can you find your source material. Think about setting aside some time to really organize it, and continuously, maybe on a quarterly basis, continuing to edit that and keep track of that, keep improving that. Drafting, this is the part that we're going to go through a few different prompts to help you increase the effectiveness of the initial draft. And then editing is one that a lot of people miss when they get something back from the AI that they don't like. They often say, phrase it in a more casual tone, or in a more this type of tone, or speak like a sailor, or whatever it might be. But there are better ways to communicate with it when you want to edit it. And we'll go through that here in a second, being very clear about how you want to change whatever draft or whatever you've created. The large language models that I focus on are these. There's a lot of different tools out there. I have kicked the tires on over 100 of them, and really 99% of them are garbage. A lot of them are just terrible, wrappers that have these models at the core. So specifically when you're working text-based, we're not going to really talk about video or images. That's kind of a separate conversation. But anything text-based, these are the models that I focus on. Google's Gemini, I think, is the best overall. I use it constantly as sort of my co-pilot. I know is a word that gets thrown around a lot, but I've really started to think of Gemini. Anything I'm working on, I just kind of toss it in there and say, what do you think about this? How can I improve this, etc. Claude 3 for writing, as Adam is one of the biggest fanboys of Claude 3, will tell you this thing really rocks at writing. It's been trained on essays dramatically outperforms ChatGPT when it comes to writing, and it can hold a ton of information in its window, in its context window, in its memory. So you can load in there many documents, full novels of information, and use that as your source material as you're creating or working on whatever you're creating on. Perplexity AI is fantastic for doing research. If you haven't tried Perplexity AI, I highly recommend that. I use it way more than Google. In fact, what it does is it'll take a search query and it'll actually perform 40 or 50 different searches behind the scenes and pull back a report based on your query. So this is a great tool for research. It's a great tool for fact checking your work. We're going to get into that, how to reduce hallucinations in your drafts. And it's great for finding source material, which is starting to be my mantra these days. ChatGPT, GPT-4 still shines because of its custom GPTs. These are a major part of my day, building out these custom GPTs. I have a YouTube channel, which I'll share with you at the end, where a lot of it is focused on building these custom GPTs, which can automate different workflows and processes. So ChatGPT still has this, I think, the best ecosystem for automating tasks.
Hey, got time for a quick question?
Sure.
So from Stacey Sand, which of these LLM tools does the best job in incorporating SEO keywords into content creation?
I think they can all do pretty well for that, but as a that would be, I would consider a writing task. My first go-to would be Claude 3. If once you've finished an article, oftentimes I will say, that'll be one of my final edits, getting back to my, my little speech about keeping edits separately. At the very end, oftentimes I'll say, now I got it exactly how I want it. Please optimize it for X keyword. Make sure this keyword's in there, 4 or 5 times. I would trust Claude Opus 3 with that above the others. I think they would all do a fairly good job, especially if you really are specifically saying just insert this keyword a handful of times and you're not somehow asking it to do a full rewrite accidentally.
Are you going to explain what a custom GPT is?
I didn't have that in today's.
George, just give a quick.
I can, yeah. So a custom GPT is a way that you can take. There are various use cases for it, but what I like to use it for more than anything else is I'll create a process. So I did one just today. I did a video on creating a custom GPT for grocery shopping. And so the process is, okay, what are the dietary needs of the household? Step 2 would be meal planning. Step 3 would be, a list of ingredients. Step 4 would be checking those ingredients against the ones you have in your fridge already. And then, the last step would be actually creating the grocery list. So those are all a bunch of different prompts that you can then load in behind the scenes of this custom GPT, and it'll just go right through that whole sequence. You can do the same thing for really anything, coming up with topics. You can load in a bunch of information in the background and you can get it to behave certain ways. It really helps so you don't have to really copy and paste prompts in, or you don't really have to copy and paste source material in. You can have that all living in the background of these custom GPTs. I could jump in and maybe try to do a quick demo of that, or we could save that maybe for the
just everybody knows. There's a limit to what you can get through in 45 minutes. In fact, one of the things that we offer is going to be a 90-minute sort of deep dive, a much more hands-on workshop, and I'll put a link to that later on so that you can sign up for that. That's great. Thanks, Casey.
You bet. So here's a basic use case, since there's probably a lot of people on here at various different levels of experience with AI. This is one that I think everybody can use and can be, valuable. So when I get to the end of my day, I frequently have 1 to 2 to 10 different emails that require some thought in how I respond to them. And it happens to be at the end of the day where I don't have much brain power left. So I've gotten into the habit of taking those and dropping those into ChatGPT, just saying, hey, give me some different approaches to responding to this email, and then putting in just that email copy in there. And then you can follow that up with, hey, approach number 2 seems to be pretty good, but please draft a concise email in conversational English, because you don't want a 5-paragraph essay email. You just want a short, 5 or 6 sentence email, and you don't want it to talk about, how, all the fancy words that sometimes AI likes to use. So conversational English can be helpful there. And then it'll probably need a little bit of steering, a little bit more context around the situation to given the different complexities of the situation. And then it'll there'll always be some words in there that you don't like. So I've used this prompt all the time. I would never use words like this, and this. Please edit the draft, replace those words. Can be a lot better than getting it to rewrite over and over, saying you want it to sound like this person, or you want it to be a little bit more in this tone, and then it'll overwrite things that you liked, etc. So being very specific with just, hey, replace these few words. So in here you can see there's the source material is the email copy. This is the draft, and then the phase 3 is the editing, those 3 steps that I started with. Now we'll move into social media. So a slightly more, I don't want to say complex, but a step up from just that email. Here's a process I really like to use, starting with generating 30 buzzwords or trending topics in whatever your area of expertise is. Then the next prompt would be, please generate 30 buzzwords or trending topics based on your ideal customer industry. So you have your buzzwords, your trending topics, your customer industries trending topics, and then 3, you're stitching them together here in prompt 3. Please create novel connections between these 2 lists. The more unique the ideas, the better. So this, we're using the actual source material is the training data, the stuff that the large language model knows already, that the AI knows already. And then I really like how it's pulling these 2 lists together and making these different connections and pushing it to kind of think outside of the box. The word here, novel, is key. So you want it to generate a bunch of stuff. Not all of them are going to be good by any means, but there's always, for me, 100% of the time, been one in there that has a little bit of energy to it, I guess. A little bit of what Marie Kondo would, say sparks joy. There's something that jumps out. And that's the one then that I key in on, and I continue with saying, hey, please create a rough draft of, number 3 on that list. I like to do my social posts in first person, so I include that in that prompt. And here's some other ideas to get away, especially if you're using ChatGPT. It can really generate some pretty dry initial drafts that need a lot of work. And you can get it out of that sort of that 5-paragraph essay format where it starts with an introduction that basically it has no information. And then there's like 3 okay paragraphs and then a conclusion that basically has no information. Claude is a little bit better, or maybe a lot better about that. So if you're doing a lot of content creation, I would highly suggest you check out Claude and start to use these prompts. Begin with a counterintuitive claim and build your argument from there. You can really get people's attention if you're starting with, something that they would not expect you to be saying, and then push it for complexity. So saying, hey, look at some, paradoxes in this space, or some tension, some contradiction. Using those in your prompts for this initial draft can start to generate some interesting ideas. I really like this word of tension. I've been looking into a lot of fiction writing, and there's always tension, there's always these obstacles and things like that. So integrating those in a B2B setting can really help spice up what might be boring content.
There was a question here. I think you kind of answered it actually, but which tool would you use for this social media example? I think you said Claude, right?
I would use Claude for this social media example. Yeah.
I've found that Claude is the most, from what I've found, is the most trainable in terms of the tone of voice that you want to use. I find ChatGPT is all it's a bit overhyped and doesn't sound authentic. And I think it goes a little crazy in its use of emojis. It sort of uses emojis sort of in a sort of like, I'm just going to stick an emoji here, whether it has anything to do with anything or not.
Yeah, anytime you mention anything like it's a LinkedIn article, it's got rocket ships everywhere. And
I haven't actually found. I found that that Claude is the best, but it still needs the most. It still needs a lot of editing. Even more so, frankly, I frankly end up editing social media posts more than I end up editing long form stuff, frankly.
Interesting. Yeah.
By the way, interesting little comment here from Bonnie Kaplan Duoskin. ChatGPT just updated, I think, yesterday, so it now has a memory across previous interactions, which is very helpful.
Interesting.
Maybe it's more trainable. Yeah. Interesting. Yeah.
Cool. So once you've got that first draft, you typically do need a lot of work, frankly, if you want it to be something good that you're proud of. And that's where you really need to, in this process, draw on your own expertise and your own point of view. And typically I'll take a minute or two to just think about, why did that topic jump out at me when I saw it on that list? And this prompt can really help you to get that first rewrite as much closer to what you might have been envisioning by giving it that point of view, saying, start with this first sentence. Just giving it that first sentence where you're giving it a little bit of your tone and voice, naturally showing it how you would begin this. It also probably gives a little bit of point of view, but you might want to double down on that and add a little bit more of your point of view there, and think about, really what it was, what you envisioned that topic being. Getting it to rewrite first. From there, this can set you off in a great direction for the other types of editing, which we'll jump into right now. So, once you've got a draft that's looking, in your point of view, you might want to, you want to start editing large and then go to small. So start with your big edits, big picture stuff. You don't want to start with just fine tuning some of the words and sentences and then decide you don't really like the whole article, or there's something majorly wrong with it. So here's a sequence that I go through: fact checking it. So running it through Perplexity, taking your entire draft and putting it in Perplexity and saying, hey, please fact check this and return citations for all stats and facts mentioned. And that will return to you a list of all the citations, and it might say, I couldn't find citations for several of these. You can then take that, copy and paste that back into Claude or whatever the large language model you were using to draft with was. Say, please update this article and use all of these citations. Make sure that the links and citations are included in your draft, and please remove any of the other facts that we don't have citations for. And there, in just a couple steps, you've reduced all of your hallucinations. You've improved the draft by giving those citations, so people start to, view it as a credible source. And you're on to the next step. So after that, I'll typically do, and I might do this gut check before, but play the role of a critical person in my audience. Maybe I've gone off in my own world, down my own rabbit hole, got really excited about this, but somebody in my audience might say, you know what, this doesn't resonate with me for whatever reason, or they might have something to gripe about. So I like to do that gut check and say, hey, what is somebody on their worst day gonna say about this behind my back? See if there's some edits there.
Would you play one AI tool off against another? Like if you wrote it in Claude, would you go over to Perplexity and say, use that as a gut check? Because I just wonder, it's like,
all the time,
can an AI be objective about its own writing?
Yeah, all the time. That's a pretty large topic, because I was building a custom GPT today, and I found that even just if you start a new chat string, I would probably start a new string for this and say, please play the role of a critical person in my audience and criticize this, piece extensively. I'd maybe start that in another string. Maybe it's 2 instances of Claude that I have up in 2 windows. Or maybe it is Gemini, which I know is really good at, thinking through different things. But yeah, I would absolutely play them off of each other. I mean, I'm a real nerd about this. I start every day just opening all 4 of them up, and I'll put almost every once I have a prompt, I'll just copy and paste that across all 3 or 4 of them and see what they come up with, and then start to combine the results from
It
the
gets
different
pretty
models.
lonely up there in Maine, right? You need your AI friends.
Especially in the wintertime. Absolutely. So then you're getting down into the more granular. So clarity check. Is there a way that I could, restructure this? Are there places where it might seem like I'm saying the same thing and we could just kind of edit that out? Can we rearrange it in a certain way that it would make more sense and be more logical? Then we're getting into the grammar check, especially if you've done any manual, any updates to it, just making sure you're checking the grammar there. Then there's, at the very end, accidental plagiarism check. These large language models are cranking out a lot of information, so it helps you sleep better at night if you pump them through Grammarly and ask and say, is there anything that could be seen as plagiarism in this document? They can flag it for that. Other things, final edits. Sometimes if it's a social media post, I'll ask it to generate a bunch of hashtags, which I'm notoriously bad at creating. So I just love seeing those, pop up, and they may not be perfect, but it's way better than what I would come up with for hashtags. And like somebody mentioned, any SEO edits, just, giving it the keywords you want to appear there in there. And I also like to use, once we're getting down to the bottom of the editing funnel here, the word verbatim. So once you've got something really good, really close, you're excited about, but you're just doing the final tweaks, using that word, return this back to me verbatim, can be really helpful, because then you're signaling to it, don't give me a full rewrite.
Don't rewrite it, yeah.
That's always depressing when you've got it close and then it just spits out something completely different, and you got to get in there and manually.
It just has to go all bullet points, all quotations.
Yeah, exactly.
Can I
All
add?
right.
Can I add one in here? So,
Sure.
last week, a couple of weeks ago, Casey and I did a podcast with Lucy Railton, who you may remember from the first session today. And Lucy and it was about AI and content. Lucy has this list of words to avoid, because she and her team have noticed that a lot of the AIs tend to spit out some kind of cliche words, the sort of AI cliches that come up. And so they're sort of words to what she calls giveaways, that she's concerned that basically a reader and also the SEO will start to see this as a pattern, like, okay, these people are using AI too much. And so I'm going to put this actually in the chat. She actually published the list, and I reshared it. So there's a LinkedIn post on that, but it's really kind of cool, because you can basically take that list and put it into, I put it into Claude and said, don't use these words unless you have to.
Yeah. There's one word on that list I want to add: unlock. That's
Unlock.
the one that says all the time, we're unlocking a rich tapestry of
tapestry is another word.
Harnessing the one thing or another.
And starting a blog post with "in a world."
Yeah, exactly. In a world. That's where I love just starting. If you can give it that first sentence, I guarantee you the drafts, that's going to be 90% of getting it into a good place.
Great tip.
Repurposing. So a social media blog post is a really cool way to start almost any type of content. So you can just say, hey, take that and create a detailed podcast outline suitable for a 30-minute episode from this blog post, giving it the the audience, and you can give it some key takeaways, etc. But this, you don't want to think of it just as blog in isolation. It can be used for video outlines, newsletters, etc. And another thing that maybe we should get into on our upcoming workshop, Adam, is the way to do longer form content. I have figured out a really great process that I'm enjoying by asking it to create these detailed outlines. So create a very detailed outline about X topic, so it'll have the first section, the introduction, and then section 1A, section 1B. So then you can say, just draft for me a draft of section 1A, and it'll create section 1A. Then you say, create, draft section 1B, and work your way all the way through the draft. Then you can upload that entire, maybe it's a chapter of a book or something like that. And then you can work with Claude on how can we smooth over the transitions and build out these much longer pieces of content up until, ebooks or potentially full-length books, by just starting with that outline, because it can hold a ton of information in its head. It just can't. The main limitation is the response length. So you're never going to be able to force it to give you 2,000 or 3,000 words, even though it'll tell you it is. If you do put it in a word counter, it's always in the realm of about, between 400 and 800
I've got
words.
a trick for that. I've got a little trick, which is
What you
write
got?
me a 2,500 word article, minimum of 2,000 words.
Have you put that in a word counter and checked it?
Yes, it works.
Interesting.
Yeah, and this is Claude, right? And it consistently works. But if I don't put it in, I get a 900 word article.
Yeah. Interesting. I see. I haven't been able to do that with Claude. It's very interesting. I think you and I are somehow behind the scenes.
Claude likes me better than you.
I think probably Austin, maybe likes Austin, Texas a little
better.
But getting back to someone was asking about a custom GPT. So I've created a custom GPT that does all of these steps exactly, one right after the other. And maybe while we're doing questions, I can drop a link to that in the chat in a second here. But this is an example of a process that I go through many times, and that custom GPT just walks me through all of this. So it'll just ask, the first question the custom GPT will ask is, what is your area of expertise, and, who are the ideal customers? And from that, it'll just walk through each of these steps. So I don't have to do any of these I don't have to copy and paste these prompts in. Okay. So now we're getting into the buzzwords of things that are happening quite a lot now are these agents. So getting these AIs to interact with various tools out there. So these are some things that are on the horizon. GPT-5 being, sort of the next version of the custom GPT. Agents being things that can use tools that can actually go in and send an email for you, or go in and actually update a spreadsheet. We're starting to see this slowly working. It hasn't happened as quickly as a lot of people have thought. And this is where there's a lot of hype in the AI space, where people can think that it can do some things that it really can't do very well, such as interacting with other tools quite yet. Then there's AGI, which OpenAI describes as an AI that can do anything that any human could really do. So right now it's kind of like an average human could, it's kind of more on an average standpoint. AGI would be kind of expert level, and then beyond that. So these are some things that are coming down the pike. And I would say, again, just the more you have your source material gathered and the more organized you have it, the more set up you are to succeed with all of these new variations that are coming up. And for me, the most successful way to get these large language models to interact with the world and interact with other things is with Zapier. So I don't know if everyone's familiar with Zapier, but Zapier is basically a service that allows all different types of software to connect. The APIs, the code in the background from various software platforms to connect to one another. And these large language models are very quickly becoming kind of the brain, or a very valuable part of that ecosystem of connecting these APIs. So one use case that is fairly easy to set up, then I would again put this a little bit more on the advanced side, but you don't need to be a programmer by any means to do this, but a little bit of technical ability helps. You basically create an FAQ based on the questions that you often get. I should say this is if you're getting a lot of inbound emails, and a lot of them are garbage and junk, but that there's some gold in there. So if you're operating, I don't know if it's just sort of an info at email where people are just pinging you, but maybe there's some partnership things coming through there, but there's also just a lot of like, what are your hours and things like that. This can be a really helpful process of automating those email responses by generating an FAQ based on the questions that you're getting all the time. Then you would create a custom GPT assistant that holds this information. That's basically just a version of ChatGPT that has access to this FAQ and a little bit of information about you. And then you can set this all up in Zapier. Here's what that looks like in Zapier. An email comes in to your, again, this is best for like a generic email inbox, but you can also get fancy with it and get it to, maybe be filtered in different ways for your own personal use. But that email would come in, it would hit that conversation with the chat bot. And then what I like most about this is that it doesn't reply directly, because there's, a good chance that it definitely won't work 100% of the time. And, you don't want a bad email going out, one out of 10 times. So you can get it to just drop it in your draft folder. So then you, or maybe it's an assistant of yours, can then just at one point in the day look through all those drafts, send. Oh, this one's no good. Manually reply to that one. And that the ones that aren't good are also good indicators of what needs to be updated in your FAQ. So then you maybe collect the ones that it answered poorly and update your FAQ so that you can get better and better and better with those responses. And at the same time, then you're building this knowledge base. In a way, you're building out this bot that knows a whole lot about your company and about how to respond to certain things. And you can get very fancy with this. This is just one example. You can plug this AI, these custom assistants, into all different types of software stacks and have it do a lot of fancy things. You can think about different assistants for different departments. There's just a lot of ways you can go, but I think this is one use case that is hopefully useful to get started with it.
Great. There was
there.
Yeah. There's a question here.
Sure.
If you had to choose to only pay for the upgrade to one of these, which would you choose over the others?
It's a tough question because this is my work. So for me, it would probably be Gemini. I would probably have to go with Gemini. I think it does a mix of everything, and most importantly, with decision making, it is very good. If your job is creating content all day long, I think the combo of Claude and Perplexity, those two would get you pretty far. So that's kind of what I'd go for.
I agree with that. I found that I started off, I was using ChatGPT subscription, Claude subscription, Gemini, still using the free version, but it's fine. Using 11 Labs and Perplexity, and one of my colleagues was using Jasper. And what I did was actually a side-by-side comparison across most of those tools of how it would help me take the podcast that we do weekly to turn that into a blog post. Claude kept winning. In fact, Jasper, and this is one of my colleagues who loves Jasper, said that she just couldn't get it to do the task for some reason. It just couldn't get it. And ChatGPT was generic. Perplexity ended up with just doing a bunch of bullet points, and I'm not really sure what the issue was. And so it came back to it. So if it's for writing, I would go Claude. But I, to be honest, I haven't really used Gemini enough to judge that.
Gemini is solid. I think ChatGPT suffers from the fact that they were the first to market. They got a lot of pushback, and it actually was performing much better earlier on.
Right.
And then they started to put these guardrails up for various reasons, from pressure of all sorts of different angles. And it has become now, I would say, the least powerful tool, but it has some major advantages with the automation in the back end and the ways you can share stuff with teams. So it's a really tough decision. And what's even tougher is to know how often are you going to reevaluate this stuff on an ongoing basis, because they're always leapfrogging each other. And that's going to significantly disrupt your workflow. So that's something I've been working with a lot of my clients on, setting up that policy for their team that, they're going to go with Gemini for these reasons, and We're only going to reevaluate every 1 or 2 years or something like that, and just get the most out of it, because they're all decent. You can get it done with all of them, but some of them may take a little more work in certain areas than others.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Okay. Casey, thanks. Oh, sorry. You want to cover one more thing?
Yeah, I've got a couple other things just to think about.
We got two minutes, and then we got to wrap it up.
Oh, okay, cool. So just a big picture, kind of zooming out, thinking about these big knowledge bases that you can pull in your brand data, your customer data, strategy, tactics. Like, all we really talked about was tactics, and that's what a lot of these conversations get pulled into, these tactics. But there's a much bigger picture here that you can think about when you collect this data. You can also think about the flip side of it with management. So thinking about your agency culture, the needs of your team, how to onboard and connect your team even better is the flip side of that. But these are all very similar processes, starting with keeping that source material in a good place there, organized and in one place. So, yeah.
Casey, that's awesome. There you go. That's how to get hold of Casey. I think you've got your what's your new URL, your new website?
Down at the bottom, bzgroup.ai is my new website, brand new, just a couple days old there.
So a couple of last things to mention before you go. We are going to be running a workshop with Casey. It's the second time we've done it. First one was super successful. Everybody loved it. Stayed right till the end. And it'll be 90 minutes. It'll be somewhat similar in terms of some of the topics that we'll cover. We'll go into actually more, but it's going to be much more hands-on. So, you're going to get tools. You're going to walk away with instruction manuals on how to actually do this. A lot of value in it. So I am going to pop a link to that in the chat. Okay, it's on May 29th, 90 minutes with Casey and a little bit of help from me. Okay.
A lot of how-to in that one. A lot of demo and how-to and resources will be handed off.
Absolutely. And tell me about your YouTube channel.
So yeah, YouTube, it's growing really quickly. Every week I put in at least one, sometimes two videos that are really hands-on, practical AI use cases. Everything from building, a lot of it is around building these custom GPTs. I've come up with a pretty nice method that seems to be resonating. A lot of people are catching on to building that. So check that out. If there's something that you want to see there, drop me a comment. I love to hear about what people need from that. But yeah, that's been my main way of getting the word out, and it's been an exciting journey over the last year. Just had my 1-year anniversary.
That's fantastic. Oh my God. Yeah, that's like a decade in AI time. So last thing, we have a final wrap-up session, 15 minutes. It'll be Bob, Matt, Matthew Piet, and myself, and we're just going to be sharing what were the key things that we took away from the sessions today. So I'm going to wrap things up. I'm going to close things down. Just hustle on over there, and let me just put the link in the chat for you. It is about to go live. Hold on, don't go anywhere. There you go. Great. You can go straight over to it, and I will see you there. Casey, thank you as ever. Absolutely brilliant.
Thanks, everybody. I appreciate your time. Have a great weekend.
See you. Bye.
Bye.